Everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to wait for a few minutes for everyone else to join, and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone joining. We're just giving it a few minutes. People are still coming in, and then we'll kick off. Okay. Well, thank you to everyone who's joined. We're delighted to do another webinar in sort of a series of webinars that Ben and I have been doing, looking at specific use cases and ways that you can use some of Kira's newest functionality. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben and we'll introduce ourselves for those of you who haven't met us before, and then we'll get into the webinar.
Just a quick reminder for confidentiality. So this webinar, everything is meant to be confidential, and so please do not share this with anyone outside of your organization. We'll jump straight into our introduction. So my name's Ben Kim. I am one of the solutions consultants at Litera. We are composed of a lot of product experts who work with the end users on a day-to-day basis, whether it be through onboarding, training, discussion of use cases, workflows, anything that the end users need to know about the product. We are the ones that will help them out. I was a former practicing attorney myself. I was a leverage finance lawyer for many years before joining Kira back in 2018. And in 2021, we became part of the Litera family.
And it was a similar story for me. So my name is JC Kenny. I'm the Director of Client Value and Innovation at Litera. So after many years also in practice, but on the M&A side at Sherman, I joined the Kira team nearly 5 years ago now, and advise our clients on the value they can get out of the Kira solution, but actually also more broadly as we look at some of our AI solutions across all of our transactional workflows and our agentic AI solutions there too.
Right. So just a little bit of housekeeping for this webinar. So the presentation is meant to be about 45 minutes. We may go over a little bit depending on how quickly or slowly I am. Everyone's going to be muted. And so if you do have any questions, there's going to be a question section in the GoToWebinar panel that you see. And from there, you can ask any questions. At the end, if we have time, we'll try and respond to some of the questions. If we don't have time to get to your question, we'll try and send you an email with a response to any questions you have. So please do ask any and every question that you have as we go through. The final thing is that this is being recorded. So once it is complete, we will send you an email with a link to the full recording of the webinar.
Great. So by way of agenda, we're going to try and set the scene before we get into showing you some of the new features in Kira that can help you with some other ways to work through some of your document reviews. We're going to set the scene, have a look at what's happening in this Gen AI space. Then we're going to kind of focus on Kira for today and show you those new features and walk through some use cases in practice. And as Ben said, we're going to round out with answering some of your questions that you share with us in the webinar. Great. So I think since we last even did this webinar, right, or Ben, or one of these in this series, it's fair to say there's been an even bigger sort of explosion in the interest and excitement about the opportunities that Gen AI is offering lawyers in some of these kind of core workflows and some of these use cases. So in the next slide, I just wanted to give you some stats that underpin why we're all here and why we're watching this webinar. And I think at Litera, we're really focused on making sure that you understand the application of this Gen AI, because I think what you'll see in this slide is stats that represent this sort of unprecedented growth in legal technology and this kind of significant shift in the sort of opportunity that everyone has, but we know with that comes significant risk too. So we kind of want to look at it today and understand that both of those things are equally important. So we want to look at this opportunity that the Gen AI has given us, but also talk about the risks, and importantly, look at how Kira has managed some of those in the way that we've built the product. So you're seeing there just how many new legal tech vendors there are, half of which it is anticipated sort of will fail. So we want to sort of just position Kira for you in that space. But all of this is, you know, fueling a lot of excitement. The investment definitely is. So we will just kind of walk you through what this practically means in terms of your use of Kira going forward. But wanted to start there, so we set the scene. Go to the next slide. We always want to reflect on, I think, the differences that we're seeing with what Ben and I have worked on traditionally with machine learning models, and then what is coming about with these generative AI capabilities. And I don't probably need to tell many of you on this call about hallucinations, but hallucinations, of course, are unique to generative AI. This is a new era that came along with this type of AI that we sort of will control and manage from a product perspective. But why this is really important is because Kira and other kind of machine learning tools always had a chance of being incorrect, right? We always talk about predictive models, and we will be the first to always say that Kira isn't 100% accurate, much in the same way that humans, of course, aren't. But this generative AI risk and this generative quality does bring this kind of unique risk. So where Kira can maybe classify something, yes or no, these kind of hallucinations are something that we want to manage and make sure we're sort of dealing with as we work through the workflows. We also want to acknowledge that this is why clients are a little bit nervous, right, Ben? I think it's fair to say in a lot of our conversations with customers, clients are really excited, but really are controlling the use of generative AI. And it's important that they do. These risks are real, and you know, these headlines really speak to that. So the risks, the benefits, we're going to cover it all today. We don't want people to have to make trade-offs, but we want to make sure that the management of it is there as well, and we'll touch on how Kira is helping customers manage that with clients and engagement letters as well as we get through. And I think this is an interesting slide to just look at different approaches. Again, we've had a lot of conversations with firms and even lawyers who are excited and using GPT, and maybe just like a chat GPT, using the pure model and experiencing some results, and maybe that creates nervousness around using sort of Gen AI. And we just wanted to share some of the sort of research that we've done when we look at, say, GPT-4 against some of the legal tech products that are using AI alongside it. And here you see where that hallucination piece is, but also just how often legal tech is willing to not answer something. So leaving something incomplete or saying, I will not answer, is really important, rather than just generating something that might not be accurate. So we'll get into that a little bit too, but this is all posing questions around kind of how much are we willing to let Gen AI kind of errors come in versus maybe going with a software that might refuse to take an action or not give an answer, because we just want to make sure that the accuracy is still there. That is still, I think, the most important thing that we can do in our jobs in providing these solutions to the lawyers.
All right, so I guess we're gonna see how everything Josie just spoke about, how it kind of layers into Kira. And Kira is a product that most of you on this call are very familiar with and use on a day-to-day basis. But I respect the fact that there's a few of you that might not know Kira or might not have seen it before. And so we're just going to give you a quick introduction before we go into the actual features, the generative AI features, and the upcoming features that we have coming in Kira. So in a nutshell, Kira is a contract review platform. It's been around for over a decade. It's been the #1 most widely used contract review platform in law firms for many, many years and still is to this day. The whole concept of Kira is to cover your entire contract review journey from start to finish. So everywhere from the import of the documents and OCRing those documents to make them machine readable and searchable, to using AI to find and extract the pertinent information that you want from it, and a whole bunch of other functionality for collaboration. So you can assign tasks, you can mark things as reviewed, you can track progress, you can make tags, flags, summarize, and most importantly, you're going to be seeing it next to the document, so you can always validate as you go through. The final thing I want to mention about Kira is that it's scalable to the biggest project. So it could be a project of 10 documents, 100 documents. It could be 100,000 documents in the project. Kira is meant to scale to these large volumes. So when you do have a very large contract review project, Kira is very well equipped and armed to help you through that process. So one thing is, as Josie mentioned earlier, you're going to have a whole bunch of these generative AI solutions coming out, and a lot that are talking about contract review. And every day there's more and more solutions, companies, products that are coming out that may seem to overlap along the way. This is a table that was created by by Legal Tech Hub, and they were going around to see and surveying to see which products are being used in this space. And when it came to contract review, as you can see, Kira still is the most widely used and one of the most widely relied upon products when it comes to contract review generally. And we have a whole bunch of penetration amongst the law firms as well as corporates as well. On the law firm side, we have 60% of the Am Law 100 that use Kira, 70% of the top 50 global law firms, and the numbers keep going on as we go through. Just to touch on a point that Josie was mentioning earlier in terms of just comparing the results of some of these products and new products, as well as Kira's existing ones. One thing with Kira is today we're going to start talking about a couple of the new generative AI features. But Kira has always used AI. So for over a decade, it's been using AI. It's just not the AI that you seem to define AI to be today. It's not generative AI. It doesn't use large language models at its base. It uses small language models that were specifically trained by the lawyers that work for Kira and validated to make sure that they're pulling out the concepts that you actually care about and that you actually need. And because of that, we're able to get an accuracy level that is beyond what we're able to find with a lot of the large language models and the GPT products or the generative AI products. And so here we're just showing how Kira's existing smart field library still outperforms a lot of the generative AI and large language model tests that we've done, even with very, very extensive prompts. And so it's something that you should still rely on going forward and something that we still will continue to push going forward. But we're here today to talk about some of the new capabilities that are coming into Kira within the next week or two. And Josie will give you a quick breakdown of what it is we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so as Ben said, and maybe for those of you who are on the call who maybe aren't as familiar with Kira, Kira comes with over 1,400 of what we call smart fields, so out-of-the-box machine learning models. That is all still there, but really what has changed is this introduction, this layering on top of the generative AI. So very much bringing it kind of into the existing interface and workflows in a few kind of key places. So you already have the ability to kind of understand the clauses and the documents and to be able to summarize those. You already have the ability to sort of chat with Kira and also to toggle that Gen AI on or off on a project by project basis. What we're going to kind of highlight today and show you, which is new, is the ability to build what we're calling generative smart fields. So actually being able to extract answers to every question you now have, so kind of going above and beyond those 1,400 out of the box smart fields. We'll also show you the ability to locate similar language across documents. That is something that we can uniquely do with what we're calling concept search. So using LLMs to find similar concepts. So again, where you might not use a traditional model, you might not want to use the generative smartphone, you might just want to do a search for a concept. And then we're going to show you the new look of Kira as well, which we hope you'll find sort of clean and a nice fresh view to be working as well. And while we are here, I do just want to note for those of you who are existing Kira customers, I know a few of you are joining us on this call. Like all kind of features in Kira, this is all included within your Kira subscription. So there's actually no added cost to you for the GenAI features. So if you've opted to use Litera's Azure OpenAI deployment, there's no additional cost for that. So you'll get all the goodness and be able to kind of benefit from using all these features as part of your Kira subscription. With that, I think that's enough talk. We can see a bit of it in action. Let me jump in.
All right, so we're going to play this as a bit of a little role-playing bit where, for those of you that have seen Josie and my many webinars in the past, usually I'm the one asking the question and she's the one showing it on the screen, but we decided to flip the script to make things a bit fresh. And so she's going to be the one asking questions. I'm going to be going through and explaining it in Kira itself. So hopefully you enjoy, hopefully it's realistic, but we'll do our best. So with that, I guess, Josie, did you want to start, just set the stage?
Yeah, let's give a sort of scenario. I think we spend a lot of time getting ideas from a lot of the people on the call and working with the lawyers. So we're going to look at the review of some limited partnership agreements. So we're going to put ourselves in a kind of private equity space. We know LPAs has come up a lot in the past, and Ben and I have had to field questions where people are asking if there aren't any smart fields that are going to help with kind of some of the key concepts in limited partnership agreements. And in this instance, why don't we take kind of a key concept I know that people have asked us for, which is concepts related to a distribution waterfall. So what we would have probably done is said, okay, you know, how many do you have? Would it be an option to maybe do a custom smart field and train that? But there's always the hard thing of just how many examples you have, maybe the time to value if it's just a one-off thing. So do we now have an alternative to this? I think I know the answer.
You might know the answer. So yeah, as we mentioned before, we have a whole extensive library of smart fields in Kira. There's about 1,442 smart fields today that have been pre-trained and out of the box. And although it's a very large universe of smart fields, it's still going to be a limited universe. And so there will be situations like this where we don't have a smart field that's been pre-trained for what you're looking for. And as Josie mentioned, you always had the ability to create custom smart fields in Kira by quick study, but you'd have to provide a bunch of examples, and then you would train it, validate it, do all these things. But if you're in a time crunch and you really wanted to just find something right away, in the past, we never had something that could satisfy that need. But now what we are about to release is what we're calling generative smart fields, where we're layering in generative AI into our regular smart field infrastructure and our document viewer and worksheet infrastructure, so that you can get a quick answer and also validate right away and still use the answers in the same way you would use traditional smart fields going forward. So if we're talking about distribution waterfalls and we want to create a new smart field, let's say for trying to find the preferred return, then what we can do is, whether it be from the worksheet or from the analysis grid, we can create a smart field from both, but I'm just going to create it from the worksheet for now. I've started off with this blank worksheet for now, just so that it cuts out any noise. But so if I create one, I could create one from scratch, and I can just remove the title party's date for now, just to make everything clean. And so I would add a smart field from the top. And in the past, you would create a smart field from here, and this would lead you to your regular custom training fields. Beneath, we're going to have one with this little generative symbol in here where you can create a generative smart field. So if I click into here, right away, I can just enter a prompt or a question. So I'm just going to ask a simple question: what is the preferred return? question mark. And below, we're going to have different output types. On release in the next week or two, it'll only be the insight type that'll be available, which is going to provide you an answer as well as a source of where it got that answer from. But in the future, we're going to enhance that where you can make it just an extraction. You can have it answer as a yes or no, or you can have it answer as a multiple choice. But in every situation, we're still going to always bring you back to the source of where it got those answers from. So when I click next, what it will do is it'll take a sampling of the documents that this worksheet is applied to, and it'll start providing me some answers. And so I could take a look at this and see some of the answers, as well as look down and look at some of the sources to see if this is an output that I am happy with. If not, I could always jump back in and edit it. If I'm happy with it, then I could just click next, and then I'll give it a name. So we'll call it preferred return. Oops. And I will click save. And then now I'll immediately see it in my worksheet. And so what this means is that any document that this worksheet's applied to will immediately start applying this new generative smart field to that document, and it will start pulling out an answer and an extraction. So if we want to look at what it looks like within the document viewer, it'll look something like this, where it'll provide me an answer and it'll give me the source. And I could go through, and as it starts pulling it out, there's going to be a couple minutes that it takes to do so. You're going to start seeing it across each of the documents. See if this one goes through.
That's good.
Yeah. And so that's going to be the one when we look at preferred returns, but then we could also jump in and add as many that we want in terms of the generative smart fields, or we can also combine them with smart fields from the smart field library. So if I want to create another one on GP catch-up, which is another common concept when it comes to distribution waterfalls, I could ask the simple question, is there a GP catch-up? But maybe I only want to see the percentage of the GP and LP split rather than seeing this extensive answer the whole way through. Then I could just add to my prompt and say, not just ask, is there a GP catch-up? I could say, and if so, answer only with the percentage going to the GP and the LP. And so when I click next there, I could take a look at the preview, and it'll start showing me just the answers that I'm looking for as I go through. And if I'm still not happy with that, I could always jump back in, I could re-edit it and maybe add more to the prompt or the question. And then when I'm happy with it, I just click next, give it a name, GP catch-up, and then save, and add that to the worksheet. And so we have another one that's already added. And so a third example I want to give is when it comes to carried interest. So I might want to know, what is the carried interest? But maybe when I look at the answers for this, I'm finding that it's catching too many things. So then, like I would with any Gen AI tool I'm using, I could always add more color to it and maybe just give a full definition of what I mean by carried interest. And then that will just potentially give me a more specific response as I go through. And then I could look at the preview, and if I'm happy with it, I could click next and then give it a name. And so immediately, just in these few minutes, I was able to create 3 separate smart fields, which are pulling answers from each of the documents and providing the sources from where it got that answer from.
Yeah, I think anyone who's trained smart fields historically, the speed of that is pretty impressive, just to get 3 kind of, maybe unique for you in that particular transaction, or otherwise something that is unique in the way you want to capture it versus a smart field. Lots of opportunities there. I like how the answer and the source are sort of side by side. Is there a way, I imagine there's scenarios where there's some documents where there isn't the clause as well as where there is. Is there a quick way to check where Kira hasn't found those particular clauses or concepts?
Yeah, of course. So what we've done is we have transformed our analysis chart that you were used to seeing in the past, which would have looked something like this, into an analysis grid, which looks much like this. And so this is going to be an easy way where you could just take a look at each of the answers. You can look down and check each of the sources to make sure that they're correct. And it's just a very quick way to take a zoom out and validate whether or not the sources and the answers are matching up and it's providing the same results that we were trying to look for. And if you ever want to check the sources themselves, you can just click on the link. It'll take you to the document, and then you could check them in. One thing that you mentioned, Josie, earlier in this webinar is how we all have experienced the hallucinations of generative AI. And when you're trying to create a story for your 4-year-old using ChatGPT, it's okay if there's some hallucinations. But when you're trying to do legal work and it really matters if you get the answer right or wrong, and there can be very real consequences, it's very important to have a very quick validation or a path in order to make sure that the answers are correct. And that's why it's so valuable to just have the sources right underneath, as you can just click on them, take a quick look, make sure that it's pulling from the right source and that the answer is in fact correct before moving on with it.
Yeah, and it's nice to even have a preview of that before you jumped into the document, just even being able to get a sense of what it's pulling in the first instance. So you could make any changes to your prompt right there would be really useful.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And also going back to your previous question, when we go back to the grid, this is just going to be an easy way just to zoom out, just to take a look at one or at each of the answers side by side, along with their sources as they go through.
Yeah, lots of validation steps, lots of places you can actually see, come back to the document, make any changes. I think anyone who's done any kind of looking at prompts and you realize just small tweaks can make a change, especially if maybe how you want the output to be changes as well. But being able to just see that track through and seeing that across lots of documents, I can see that's really useful.
Before you go on, sorry, there's one last thing. Like, a lot of people like to operate out of the document list itself. And so this is also where you can look for it as well, right? So if I just wanted to look for the carried interest results that I wanted within the document list, then I could filter out for anything that has extractions for the new field that I just created, which is carried interest. And then it should show up in the document list as well. Or it's not right now in my current. Okay, let's skip that for now, but that's just a bug in my current demo instance, so apologies for that.
Yeah, I think it's good to think that all the kind of usual paths and the ways of getting to information and diving deep or checking things is all kind of still there in the platform versus if you're using just a ChatGPT or something like that. So maybe this is the $1 million question in this webinar, I don't know, but if it's that easy to create the sort of generative smart fields and use the LLMs in that way, what does that mean, do you think, for the existing smart fields that we have in the smart field library? So those 1,400 that we talked about in the intro, what does it mean for those?
This is a question that does come up quite a bit, where people ask, does this mean that all of the existing smart fields are obsolete and we don't need them anymore, and then we'll just create a whole bunch of generative smart fields? This goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the webinar, where we have done and continue to do extensive testing between the smart fields that we've already pre-trained versus generative smart fields with simple prompts, with very complex prompts, with prompts that span across pages, just to see where the accuracies lie. And we keep coming up with the same answer, that the existing smart fields are still more accurate than the generative smart fields. And so to the extent there is an existing smart field, I would say you're probably best off relying on that. And the generative smart fields come in where you are trying to find something that we don't have an existing smart field for. But there still is a workflow where you can use them side by side. I'm going to shift over to a different project here, and I'm going to show a very simple example when it comes to termination for convenience. So we do have an existing termination for convenience smart field, but maybe you just want to find out the number of days notice where there is a termination for convenience. And as you know, with our existing smart fields, they extract the entire concept. And if you just want to find a simple answer, you could still create a new generative smart field that overlaps it. So if I'm going to create one, I'm just going to add the prompt here. Just copy and paste it for time. Whether either party can terminate for convenience, and if so, how many days notice must be given prior to that termination. And so I'm going to click next. And if I'm happy with the preview, click next again. And I'm just going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it TOC notice for now. And then we click save, and then it pops up as a generative smart field. So in a minute or so, it's going to start populating everything that I have this M&A worksheet applied to. It's going to start populating an answer for those in there. So what we can do is we can jump into the grid and start looking at them side by side. So when I jump into the grid, I'm going to start hiding all of the columns, and I'm just going to open up the columns for termination for convenience, as well as this TOC notice smart field, that generative smart field I just created. And so an easy workflow to help with my validation to make sure that I'm not getting hallucinations out of the Gen AI is I can just quickly scroll down and see wherever it says, yes, a party can terminate for convenience, make sure that the sources somewhat line up. And there's a quick way just to quickly validate to make sure, okay, everything's going correctly. It's not saying yes in situations where there isn't an existing smart field extraction for termination for convenience. And there is an example here, thankfully, as I go down, where it says, yes, either party can terminate, but I notice that there is not an extraction for the smart field termination for convenience. And these are the situations where I could jump in and start taking another look. And over here, I'll take a look and I'll see, oh, this is talking about an auto renewal cancellation. It's not actually a true termination for convenience. So in this one, I could jump in here and just say no. And then I could either keep or remove this source. And this is a way where I could quickly jump in, edit, and fix any of the mistakes that the Gen AI may have made.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, this is the kind of detail we care about when it comes to accuracy, right? You see the sort of quick time to value, you see the opportunity of being able to create those generative smart fields so quickly, but kind of grounding that in the kind of trusted Kira models, but also coming back to that grid, right? You can only do that verification and that check across all those documents because you've got the kind of management of that bulk contract review capability in Kira with the other bits that aren't AI at all. They're just kind of features that help make sure you can get back to that document easily to check.
Yeah, 100%. And so it's helping you upkeep that accuracy, but still making everything a lot more efficient as you go along.
Yeah, great. So I can see there's a unique opportunity, and this has also definitely been the case where if you're wanting to report in a particular way, or there's a particular part about termination that's really poignant that you need to be pulling out in a specific format, as you've done there, you know, prompting maybe to get something, but you want to use the Kira smart fields. Is there any way to sort of be prompting, so using the Gen AI to ask a question of what's already been extracted? So kind of bringing those two things that you've presented there together, and getting the LLM to just be pointed directly at that extraction, perhaps that the smart field's done. Could we get the Gen AI just to let me know maybe just the notice period from within those termination for convenience extractions?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. It's not something that we can do today, but it is definitely something that we're looking to build in and that we're trying to release in the coming months. Would be a way to combine the two. So where you do have a smart field that brings out a very extensive extraction, then just querying within that extraction itself. So really kind of hitting at that accuracy rather than relying on the LLM to figure it out from the entire document as a whole. And so that's definitely something that we're putting together. And we already have the designs ready, and we're in the process of building it out for a hopeful launch the end of this year, early next year.
Nice, yeah. It feels like a unique opportunity in terms of Kira and everything we've built so far, and then the opportunities that the Gen AI brings on top. Okay, I like it all, but there is a nervousness as I see all of this, and I think about the management of kind of creating generative smart fields. So if I'm, say, in that time crunch, I've just done exactly what you've done, which was, I don't know, it was minutes that you created, you know, 3 generative smart fields to quickly check those things in the LPAs. And maybe, this is probably the reality, not the best prompt engineer, did something quick to get the job done. It was oversimplified, and maybe it wasn't yielding the most accurate results. how do I stop everyone else in the business using those and relying on them maybe if they see them in Kira?
Yeah, of course. So when I created this generative smart field, like any custom field I create in Kira, I'm the only one that can see it and has access to it. The only way other people are able to access it and use it or even know that it exists is if I specifically add them to that field. So if I jump into Quick Study and I go to TOC and I search for TOC notice, oops, which I just created, I'd have to go into Quick Study, go into that field itself, go to users, and start individually adding users to that field so that they're able to see it. So if you're creating a bunch of random generative smart fields with some very naive or not that accurate prompts, then you don't have to be worried that other people are going to accidentally be relying on those.
Okay, nice. And I'm now speaking to some of the people I know who are on the call. So I'm a much more experienced knowledge lawyer or someone who helps manage a lot of this for my firm. I've actually created a great complex prompt. I've tested it extensively. I know it really works well. It plugs a great gap in terms of the specific way people were looking to kind of extract a data point from a certain contract type. I can make that available to all the users, right? So do I have to type all those people out, name them all individually? How does that piece work?
Yeah, no. You can actually do it with a quick click of a button. So if I go and I choose to publish the field, then once I publish it, everybody on my instance will have access to that field. So if you are one of the knowledge lawyers and you have created a very well put together prompt and you've tested it extensively and you want everyone else to be able to use it and to actually use it continuously, then you could always publish it and then everybody on the instance will have access to use it.
Nice. I like the sort of controls, but also I think with some of the other tooling that we've seen that isn't specifically built for legal, there's no opportunity to share in quite the same way. You know, if you're working in a ChatGPT or a Copilot, it's pretty individualistic. So I like the idea that where there is great knowledge, that can be shared but managed appropriately depending on kind of what people are doing and what they're building it for. Okay, this is all making a lot of sense. I'm going to sort of summarize. We're relying on the Kira smart fields to the extent we want to because we can be really confident in their accuracy. But now we can expand to new document types, as you did with the LPAs, or actually new concepts and kind of maybe getting to some numbers and things like that maybe we didn't before with the smart fields. And I can do that by creating these new generative smart fields. So we started here, right? We're managing the opportunities with the risks, but imagining that I am running up against issues with my client who really loves Kira. We've used it before on their matters, trusts that sort of traditional AI, and maybe because of the sort of risk of hallucinations or otherwise is prohibiting the use of Gen AI on this particular project. Maybe it's this PE client, and when I'm looking at the LPAs, if I still want to use Kira for the DD or for some other contract review, but without the ability to use the Gen AI, how can I sort of control that process?
Yeah, no, this is actually a common question as well because Kira is one of those products that is available to everybody within your firm or your organization. And so we thought very hard and built in a good plan in terms of how you can avoid using generative AI features for just those clients that don't want their documents to be processed via generative AI. And so when you create a new project, you'll always have this toggle available. So from a project to project basis, you're able to keep Gen AI features enabled, or you can toggle it off, which disables all of the Gen AI features so that nobody in the project will accidentally use them. Another additional failsafe that we're introducing on Saturday is going to be a custom messaging system. So the super admins within the Kira instance are able to put in custom messaging that the user has to read and acknowledge by checking the box before they set up the worksheet. So this could be your Gen AI policy. It could just be big, bold, capital letters saying, do not proceed unless you're sure that the client is okay with GenAI being used on their documents. And that will be required to be checked and acknowledged before you're able to ever create your project.
Great. That's good. And we said it wouldn't all be about generative AI, and we've got some other new features, and it's important to kind of acknowledge that some of them aren't Gen AI. So in exactly that instance, you could still benefit from using them, which is really important, right? We don't want anyone, our entire job and in doing this, right, Ben, we don't want anyone to have to go back to the purely manual review. So we don't want the Gen AI to be the thing that gets in the way of that. So right. I know when you're showing off the generative smart fields and the analysis grid, we kind of got a sneak peek of the new button there that says concept search. So let me say, is that a new Gen AI feature, or is that something I could use in that scenario?
The concept search is not a new Gen AI feature, but it's something that I do want to show you, and I'm glad you mentioned it. So concept search is a way to very quickly and easily look for semantically similar concepts across documents. So as an example, if I was jumping through a lease and I was going through and I'm reviewing it, and then I see a concept here which might be new to me, or I'm just curious generally in the course of my review, oh, does this concept exist in other documents? I could quickly just copy the language, and then I'll go into concept search, and then I'll paste it, and I'll click on concept search. And what Kira will do almost instantaneously is find any document that has semantically similar language across, and then you could click into it, take a look at it, you can highlight it, tag it, add it as a new field or a dummy field if you want. But the one thing to keep in mind about concept search is that it is not utilizing generative AI. In fact, the information is never leaving the Kira instance. What we've done is we've coded a large language model into Kira, into your Kira instance, and we have enabled it and processed so that it's going to find these semantically similar concepts across the board. So even if you are not allowed to use generative AI on the client's documents, you're still able to use concept search. You can use it however you'd like. It operates out of the document list like a search. And so you still have the capability of doing keyword searches and all of these other search actions within Kira, but concept search gives you a chance to find semantically similar concepts across your project as a quick look. And so this could be a concept that you were just like, oh, shoot, I didn't know this existed. Let's double check to make sure it's anywhere else. Or maybe you have a playbook in-house so that you're just saying like, oh, I need to look and see if a similar concept to X or Y exists within all the documents. And then you can just do a quick scan to make sure that it's there.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's where it's very easy to lump LLMs with generative AI, but actually here's the use of LLMs without generating anything. As you say, this is just looking for those similar clauses and concepts, and LLMs are great at doing that, but we're not straying into that territory where we're generating content. So it's a neat use of the LLMs there too. So I can just quickly, if I'm in the document, copy and paste that into the concept search. Do I need to copy and paste the full clause in there for that to work?
No, you can copy paste as much or as little as you want. You can even just start typing something out. If I want to find construction by landlord, then I could just do that as a concept search on its own. But one thing to keep in mind is, like, as you see here, there's just going to be a whole bunch of irrelevant stuff that comes out because it's too simple of a concept, just being construction by landlord. There's a lot of semantically similar variations of that. So if you want more accuracy, I would say, you know, try and copy and paste a larger portion of any clause that you're looking for or concept that you're looking for. But if you do want something that's quite broad, then you could just type in a very simple concept to put in there, and it'll find a much more expansive set of results than you might be anticipating. And I think that's everything that we wanted to show you today in terms of what's upcoming. One thing I did want to mention before we move on. Oh, sorry, Josie, do you have?
No, I'm just pulling up the questions. You go ahead.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, one thing I did want to kind of just remind everybody as we do jump into the questions is in terms of releases. So in terms of the generative smart fields and the concept search, these are happening on a rolling release. So it'll start as of this Saturday, but it'll be rolling into October as well. And so depending on the location of where your cloud environment is set, it might come out at a different date. What the hope is by the end of October, everyone on a cloud instance is going to have access to concept search and generative smart fields. The custom messaging at the project creation that I showed will be available to everybody as of Saturday. And when I say everybody, I am talking about cloud customer instances. If you're on-prem, unfortunately, you're going to be waiting until the on-prem upgrade towards the end of the year. And currently, concept search will not be made available for on-prem, as we're looking at ways that we can actually deploy it realistically. But for now, it's going to be exclusive only to the cloud environments.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. And maybe just a few questions that we can cover off, and the rest we can follow up with. This always comes up for me with working with firms across Europe, but question around, does the concept search work when it's the same legal idea, but it's expressed differently across maybe different subsidiaries or jurisdictions? For example, different ways of describing something in French versus Belgium versus Swiss. So quite niche there, but more broadly, can we kind of cover off the language piece?
Yeah. I think when it comes down to both concept search and the generative smart fields and all of the Gen AI features in Kira, they are going to be fully language agnostic. And so we do quite a bit of testing on other languages as well to make sure that the results are still accurate. And so far, everything seems fine. And so we do suggest that people should be, or if you're operating in a non-English Latin script language, then you should be using these features going forward. And even if you are, let's say you only speak English, but you're looking at a French document and you don't know a lick of French, you could still be asking questions or prompts to those documents and you'll get an English answer for them. And so whichever way you're looking at it from a foreign language basis, you're going to be able to get the answers and concepts you're looking for.
Great. And this one comes in from one of our corporate legal departments. And I know we have a few kind of corporates on the call as well as law firms. So this question, I think you mentioned it a little bit, which is if you've got the large volume, but you're dealing with non-standard clauses, is that something that Kira's generative smart field? So maybe a different workflow to kind of, I'm looking at all my LPAs and looking for those concepts. If you've got, a lot of contracts who are trying to manage the risk of kind of finding which clauses are maybe not standard, that sort of workflow. Do you think generative smart fields could help with that?
I think you might be better equipped to answer.
Yeah, I think I know at least working with some of the corporate customers and showing them this, I would say this is really useful where actually with a traditional smart field, you maybe needed more volume. So I think in many instances where you're doing that comparison and looking at maybe what's not standard, you might not have as many. We're not talking about that kind of law firm context sometimes where there's thousands. Maybe you've just got a handful and you're wanting to look at specific language. That would be a perfect example where you could use generative smart fields because you don't need that sort of traditional 30 to 50 to train a traditional smart field. So I think definitely you could use it for that. And I think the other thing that we've seen interest from corporate legal departments with is pulling out those kind of dates and values a bit more. That can be really good for kind of checking things in that kind of what's not standard or playbook review, those sorts of things. I think the generative smart fields would be pretty effective for that piece too. I know we're running up on time, but maybe we can just help. If people are existing Kira customer, how can they access these capabilities?
Yeah, so for existing Kira customers, they're just going to start showing up on your instance. With Kira, we've always had the same approach ever since we started, is that we're not going to ask people to pay for new features as and when they come out. They're always going to be included within your subscription. And so for the generative AI features, you will need to connect to an Azure OpenAI deployment. And so this could be your own, or it could be Litera's. One thing that a lot of the existing customers have seen are notices saying that we are allowing them to connect to Kira's GenAI instance, which is an Azure OpenAI deployment that's managed by Latera. And so if you click on that, you don't have to cover the token costs. We absorb all the token costs, and you can use all the GenAI features instantly if you ever wanted to activate it. But on that same note, as the super admin of your instance, you also have the power to disable all generative AI by disconnecting it if your existing security policies have changed or if you wanted some time before you enabled it for everybody on the instance.
I know we have a slide. I think the next slide, if people obviously have want to see a more in-depth demo who aren't already Kira customers, you can request a demo, or otherwise you can reach out to your Latera team and they can walk through any of the specifics with you. I think that's probably all we have time for. I know we've gone a bit over. So with that, we'll follow up with other questions. But thank you so much to all of you for your time. It was good to play the dumb one and ask you all the questions today, Ben. We'll see what we do next time.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Thanks everybody for your time.